China wants control. It wants control of these sea routes, these choke points. It wants to be able to exercise pressure if and when it feels that it needs to.
We've got to face up to the fact that sometimes things will happen which we may not like.
This is a security and defense challenge.
Well, that rather neatly brings us on to the next part of this discussion, where the question is the relative decline of US and Western naval forces, which we've heard about, a sign of the end of Western dominance? And will China become the world power of the future? Not least, I suppose, because it's moving in the opposite direction. I mean, briefly, I guess that's what you would think, isn't it?
Well, it's what you might think. I mean, I don't think that past performance is necessarily a guarantee of future achievement. And China has a lot of internal problems right now. But certainly it will continue to be a power. Quite what the curve looks like from now on is going to be determined by a lot of other factors. And again, not just naval power, but that its navy, I mean, what is China's naval ambition? It's essentially to deny, it's to control the first island chain so that it can get its submarines out into the Pacific and to deny American access to those waters. So it's trying to control its maritime neighborhood. They would argue for security reasons. But again, controlling that maritime neighborhood, I can't stress often enough, means that they control the choke points. They don't have to launch a war. They just have to tighten the valves, tighten the screws, and we all start to hurt. All of us start to hurt. Now, that's a considerable power. And if they get to that point, then, you know, they are in a position to dictate terms and conditions over a whole range of issues without firing a shot.
And over a much wider area than just the area where they're operating now.
Yes, indeed. I mean, the Chinese, again, look at the South China Sea, very few shots were fired. I mean, almost none. And certainly it was an operation that was conducted below the threshold of a military response. And you know, Sun Tzu, the much misquoted Chinese strategist, says the best war is the one you don't have to fight. So, you know, if you can get into a situation, as China is clearly building towards, where you can exercise control over, you know, through non-military means, through at least non-kinetic means, then you have power. That's what power is.
Can I ask Isabel a question there? What is the major premise of this conversation? Is it that we all ought to be the greatest power in the world? Is it that we can't stand the fact that the Chinese suddenly have pulled off a miracle and become a great power in a matter of one generation? Is it that America is no longer able to order the world around? What's the major premise of this?
Well, it's the means by which those things are achieved.
Well, that's and the means maybe means we can't do anything about. And we appear to be unable. Here we are in London debating this subject. I bet they aren't in Copenhagen or Berlin or anywhere. I mean, they just say, for goodness sake, leave the world alone for a minute. It's making enough of a mess. Whenever we get involved in the outside world, we make a mess of it even worse. And the one thing we've got to try and do is get over this neo-imperialist attitude that something going wrong, someone being more powerful somewhere in the world is a disaster for us all.
Can I just defend myself from any suggestion of neo-imperialism? What I'm arguing is that we are a small country. And we have to understand the forces that will affect our well-being and our economy and our capacity to act. And so, if you like, you have to look at the choice between Pax Sinica and Pax Americana, not because we have any revanchist imperial ambitions, because that is our reality. And I promise you, they are debating this in Denmark and they are debating it in Berlin for exactly the same reasons that we should be. That the things that affect our capacity to be ourselves are big forces, big powers, a long way away.
All right. Well, let me bring Duncan in on this, because let me ask you to take off your British Admiral's rather nice hat.
Took it off 6 years ago.
Put on a Chinese Emerald. I have no idea what that looks like. Would you be advising the government there to say, look, if you want to be this dominant power, which we kind of think they do, that building a big navy is the answer, is the way forward?
Well, countries have taken that view through history. So Peter the Great, wanted Russia to become a maritime nation. Imperial Germany and Nazi Germany had the same ambition. It's almost a reflex that goes with power, but it's also a recognition of the importance of the sea to the global trading community. I think there's just a couple of points here. I mean, we're discussing the philosophy of naval power, not the particular platforms that are used at a particular time. Naval capabilities have evolved over time.
So you're talking about undersea as well?
Yeah, well, undersea, submarines have been around for 120 years at the moment, and I can assure you that if a British nuclear submarine is in the South China Sea, it is of such significance. It's most probably flashing in Xi Jinping's Sitsen, whereas a small patrol ship is most probably insignificant and not there. So, naval power. And I think it's important that we, it's my view, that we live in the world as it is rather than as we would wish it to be. And if you look at the rearmament, the way that China is behaving, the fragrant breaches of UNCLOS, I mentioned the high north, that is soon to become most probably one of the superhighways.
This is the route,
going right over Russia from the Pacific to the east. And I've spent my life studying Russia, China to a lesser extent, and I defer to Isabel. But I don't want to take that to chance that somehow that will be free and easy to do. And the other point that's come up is debating. I can absolutely say the whole of Europe is debating this issue
about sea power.
About a revanchist Russia, a rise of China, the interconnectedness between the North Atlantic and NATO through the Indo-Pac region to what we would see as hostile and actors that are counter to our interests there.
Simon would say we don't need to worry about it. Sit back.
But I think what we should also ask is most of the world is debating this, and a lot of them are sitting there and going, who do I back in this race? Do I back China or do I back the United States? And if we step back from this challenge, which isn't warlike, it's classic deterrence, it's about containment, it's about demonstrating that we have our values and things that we believe in as well. And when it comes to the high seas, that global free trade, and I won't even say I'm not convinced the markets can deal with this on their own either, as we're seeing with the Russian shadow fleet at the moment.
Well, let me bring Simon back on this, because we're hearing the case for not sitting back as you would have it perhaps, and not intervening, which is what I know you think is the way forward. But everything we're hearing suggests that it certainly isn't the way it's being thought about in European capitals, in the US, certainly in here.
Well, any sensible country is concerned with its defence and is worried about its security. I totally understand that, and that includes being sensitive to its economic defence as well as its military defence. All I think I'm saying is that if your approach to the outside world is one of suspicion and hostility, and you're spending vast sums of money protecting against the least likely outcome, which is a naval invasion of the British Isles, then the danger is you just make conflict more likely. I do think that the handling of Russia since the demolition of the Berlin Wall reached its nadir in Putin and Ukraine. That if you treat Russia in a way that everyone who knows about Russia says is a very risky thing to do, it'll turn out to be risky, and that's exactly what's happened in the case of Russia. Now, it could well be in the case of China that China, which depends so strongly now on trade with the West. Its economy it's integrated with the American economy in all sorts of ways. The likelihood of China wanting to go to war with America, particularly a sea war, seems so unlikely. Isabel, I'm sure, knows more about this than I do.
Well, it does. Certainly that question's been asked for at least the last decade, I think, in Washington, the extent to which a war between China and the US is potentially imminent.
Well, defense correspondents had to write about something, all right? Yes, if you want a war, you can go and generate a war. Goodness knows, in the past 25 years, America's generated 5 or 6 wars. They've been utterly pointless, except one in Kosovo. It's not a good idea to see the whole world as we're seeing it. I want to see a situation in which we get on well with the Russians, get on well with the Chinese. We may even make 1 or 2 mistakes in that direction. But nonetheless, it seems to me in our interest to get on well with people. Soft power is better than strong power. And all I see at the moment like this is no one talks that way at all. No one's interested in making peace anywhere. What are we going to do about these people being stronger than we are? And that's just a very dangerous way of looking at the world.
Well, we're talking about China here. We're talking about China in this context, Isabel. Is it true that China has no interest really in using its navy in the way that many people feel?
Well, I think, no. Does China want a shooting war with America? No. But I mean, what I've been outlining is how you exert pressure and how you gain power short of a shooting war. And that actually has been happening. You know, nobody invited China to militarize the South China Sea. That was a Chinese project, and it has upset all of China's near neighbors. There's still, you know, have you heard of the Sierra Madre, which is a ship an old warship that Philippines beached on the Thomas Shoal, inside Philippines' territorial waters in order to maintain a military presence. It's falling to bits. The Chinese started inhibiting the resupply of this ship. You know, these things are going on all the time. If you saw the behavior of the Chinese Navy in the South China Sea, you wouldn't think this was entirely kind of benign and unambitious. And this isn't about us. It's about all China's neighbors in the South China Sea. It's about Vietnam, Philippines. You know, these are sovereign countries with territorial waters which are being occupied by China.
But so, what is it that China wants from this?
Well, China wants control. It wants control of these sea routes, these choke points. It wants to be able to exercise pressure if and when it feels that it needs to. Now, you know, you could say that that's defense. Putin makes the same point, that he, you know, if NATO gets too close, he needs to, you know, kind of be sure that he can be defended against hostile intent. And Simon's right in the sense that the rhetoric that we see between a militant Washington and a militant Beijing is pretty unhelpful, because you get into a thing called the security trap, where one side makes a move and the other side says, whoa, you know, I have to respond. So then you get a ratcheting up of tensions. And we've seen, but, you know, it's quite difficult at this point to get a rational conversation, the kind of hotlines, the kind of back channels that we had before. And that's not entirely the fault of the United States. It's a fault on both sides. So I'm not saying that China is going to kind of launch a war tomorrow. It would be absurd. But I am saying that if you're not alert to the way power is right now being exercised and the map is being prepared, then you're going to find yourself taken by surprise. This isn't all faraway stuff. About a year ago, a Chinese ship, a freighter called the New Polar Bear, crisscrossed the Baltic Sea, accompanied by a Russian nuclear-powered warship. And by the time the two left the Baltic Sea, they had severed 2 communications cables and an energy pipeline in the Baltic, right? Now, Taiwan, again, depends on cables, or, you know, it depends on cables for its offshore wind, for its communications, absolutely everything. The point about financial transactions. All of this is vulnerable infrastructure, and all of it's being mapped out by Russian ships as we speak. If you track what Russian ships are doing and where they're hanging around, all that undersea infrastructure is being mapped. So, you know, it's about deterrence. If you want to keep your communications and your energy secure, you have to think about this stuff.
Simon, you disagree?
No, I mean, I'm trying to see whether you say we'll be taken by surprise. We won't like it when they do it. I mean, all kinds of things happen around the world where I'm going to be taken by surprise and won't like it being done. The question is, what are we supposed to do about it? And the assumption that somehow or other we can wave hands or wave wands or wave battleships and the world will do our bidding is just unrealistic anymore. We've got to face up to the fact that sometimes things will happen which we may not like.
Indeed, but it's not about the world doing our bidding. This is not a neo-imperialist project. This is a security and defence challenge.
Well, on that point, which brings us neatly to the next bit, which I'll bring you in on, Duncan, because I think this is...
Oh, I just want to cycle back on this one.
Very quick rejoinder.
I just want to cycle back on this one, in that 95% of people who wear a uniform that I know of all 3 services don't crave war as some sort of vanity out here. They're motivated by preventing it and the notion of deterrence. And if you look at Russia, I think Isabel's covered China, but... When Russia went into Georgia through Abkhazia and South Ossetia, what was our reaction in the way? Well, that's pretty bad, but we're not really going to do anything about it. And then little green men appeared after the Olympic in Crimea, which is very sacred to Russia. I get all that. But what did we do? Nothing. You know, a couple of bans at the Olympics really doesn't move the dial. So where does it stop?
What should we have done?
Well, I think we should have taken a much more robust approach. And when I say we, I don't mean the UK.
Yeah.
I mean the US.
Or the West in general.
Because if you go to Warsaw or Riga or anyone like that at the day, they are fearful for their existential state, and their history is littered with Russians doing this as well. So investing in an insurance policy rather than succumbing to autocracies, because if we allow autocracies to become the dominant force in the planet, I'm absolutely certain all our lives will be diminished.
That brings us very neatly to the next and final line from this discussion, really, which is, if the West loses the dominance of the seas, what will be the outcome? And I mean,